All right, you've asked for my opinion on EJ's update on his Couch to Crit series from his latest FTP test. So I'm going to give it here, considering I did do a reaction video to the Couch to Crit vlog, and now I've put my foot in it and I have to give updates along the way. Before we get into where he is at now, after that 3 months of training, I just want to submit 2 pieces of evidence. I'm putting it out there. So the first thing is that he does have at least some cycling background, which some people flagged in the comments on some of the videos. So it does look like he BMX'd in high school, or at least rode the bike. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, that's like 5+ years ago. I'm not saying he's got any lingering direct fitness from that, but he has at least some background. He knows how to ride a bike. He knows how to handle his bike and has some sort of cycling background, which isn't something you can disregard. So he's not a pure beginner, kind of like gamer bloke off the couch who'd never done any exercise before. He has some experience riding a bike. Second thing is he also played baseball in college. Now, baseball is a power-based sport. Usually you would do some strength training for baseball and also sprints. You need to be powerful to pitch, to hit the ball, and then also to sprint. So there is training involved in that, and that's just another thing that shows he does have some athletic background, which is worth knowing when we're looking at the rate at which he's improving now. So February 2023, he does an FTP test where he's at, and it seemed like there was a lot of confusion around where he's at. People saying he's at a 350 FTP, or he's already doubled his FTP, or he's 4.3 watts per kilo. None of that is true. So if you look at his FTP test, this is it here. So this is the FTP test on Ethan's account. Let's give him kudos. 20 minutes at 352 watts at 83 kilos, which is about 4 watts per kilo. So first off the bat, absolutely massive improvement. Just doing 352 watts for 20 minutes is huge. So kudos to EJ for doing that. If we take the 95% rule, now we can argue all day long about whether taking 95% is FTP. I don't really care. The test is still valid, and let's just use it. So 95% of 352 puts his FTP at about 334 watts. At 83 kilos, that puts him 4 watts per kilo FTP. So massive to go from 260, 270, maybe 280 to 330 is huge in 3 months. One thing I do want to comment on with this test, which should be obvious if you look at it. Now, it was done on the trainer indoors. There's something that's going to highlight a physiological ability that Ethan has that people probably haven't noticed. And look at the cadence here. So he starts the test and he's 89, 90 RPM. And there's all these really low cadence portions of the test. So if I zoom into some of these, zoom in here, we've got 2.5 minutes, 340 watts at 48 RPM. He would be on the trainer, out of the saddle, I'm guessing, absolutely grinding the ass out of the trainer to get through these portions. Now, he's still doing the watts. This isn't to disregard the test, but what it does show, and it will pop up again when we analyze his racing, is that Ethan has a high proportion of fast twitch muscle fibers. That's what you'll see in an athlete who does a test like this, where they're naturally reverting to a lower cadence. They're getting out of the saddle and they can do these surges where they've got 1 or 2 minutes at the lower cadence. They burn through more of their fast twitch muscle fibers for those portions. Then they got to sit down again and spin it up. And you can see, like, especially in the second half of the test, this reliance more on the fast twitch muscle fibers. So you can see here, cadence drops, power goes up. So there's portions here at like 400 watts. 400 watts for 40 seconds here, and then cadence comes up, power drops. 320 watts at 90 RPM. And then again here, low portion, 350 watts at 50 RPM. Cadence comes up, power goes down. Power goes up, cadence goes down. And it's that relationship where he's getting out of the saddle, using, now again, remember he is 83 kilos, so he's using his body weight there. He still has to generate the power, obviously, but there's a reliance there and more on the fast twitch muscle fibers. So to go from, let's say, 280 watts to 330 watts in 3 months, that's about a 20% improvement. Is that possible? Yes, it's possible. In my experience with seeing hundreds of athletes' data, I have seen it does take the right circumstances of untrained going into a really intense training block with a lot of volume, a lot of load. I have seen 16, 17, 18% improvements. That's not unheard of. If he's done about 20% improvement, which he roughly has, that is possible. I'm not doubting anything I see. I think this is all legit. To me, this looks legit. I don't see any problem with it. It's just right on the upper limit of what someone's going to be able to do. but it's still possible. I don't think if it was 25, 30% improvement, I'd be calling bullshit. But to me, this is all looking legit. Then it gets interesting because a few days later, he goes out and races and wins his first race. Cherry Pie Crit, smashes it, tails up. So he does the Cat 5. That's his first race. If we actually go to the race section, 286 watts normalized, but his heart rate's pretty low, really under controlled for most of it. So I don't think aerobically this race was a max effort for him. But look at the max powers here. This is crazy. So this sprint here, he's whacking 1,530 watts. Huge. And then gets to the sprint finish and just goes thermonuclear. Launches it here, 1,470, 1,500. Like, there are not many riders that have that ability. And that's one of the things when you're just looking at someone, you have no idea their muscle fiber type composition. So Ethan, he's had the ultimate sleeper build, and turns out he's a absolute fast twitch monster because the other thing, he didn't even do any sprint training. If you go look through his training, he did that 6 months of just aerobic training, training to lose weight. Then he did his intense training block, which was more threshold focused. I haven't seen him do any sprint training in any of his training. And even with the increase in training load, where you would usually expect high aerobic loads, especially in a beginner, would suppress their fast twitch ability and their sprint outputs. But he's still cracking 1,500 easy. I mean, imagine what his true top end is. If he was in training and sent him out for a sprint training session to see what he can hit, he'd be clearing 1,600. If he's doing 15.5K at the end of a race, he's easily clearing 1,600 in training. And that is very, very, very rare. And I don't think it's a weird overeating either, because if you look at the speed he gets up to, he's a bigger rider, 83 kilos, tall, 6'3", still clocking up 59K an hour in the sprint at the end of a Cat 5 race. That's legit watts for me. So, damn, I had no idea he had that in him. And to me, this sprint ability, it makes sense now going back to the FTP test. And you're going, why is he doing these huge low cadence grinds, sort of over-unders through the test? And it's because he's got this fast twitch ability where he can surge for the 40 to 60 seconds, burn through a little bit of energy, glycolytic power in those muscle fibers. Then, once they burn through, he has to sit back down again, the power drops, and he can kind of do that. That's not the end of the story, though, because he then goes and enters the Cat 4 race and gets second. Now, this was a harder, faster-paced race overall. So if you go to the whole thing, 328 watts normalized, which is, 328 watts normalized for 40 minutes. You're kind of saying, well, his threshold probably is, at least 320, even if you take into account potential overestimation from the 95% of 20. He's still doing 328 watts norm for 40 minutes in a race. And again, 1480 max. And if you zoom into any of these portions, he's coming out of the corners and just, here, coming out of the corner there, 1400, 1200, coming out of here, 1300, 900, 1000 again, 1100, holding. I mean, the guy is just a fast twitch monster, and then lines up at the end of the race, and what's he done? 700 watts for 30 seconds, and then still has a 1300 watt kick to come around and get second, which is, wow, amazing. Very, honestly, very, very rare. To me, this is way more rare and more impressive than his performance in the 20-minute test. This is, as you can tell, I don't have many words. I haven't seen this very often. So what's he done right? The first thing he's done right is he did that entire 6-month training block pretty much without a power meter, doing low intensity general endurance training. It's something that a beginner's probably not going to do, because usually a beginner would come in and they're really motivated and they go straight into structured training, doing high intensity training, and they'll get good progress for a few months and then they'll just plateau. But he actually, the fact that he was trying to lose weight and was just trying to consistently tick off moderate, good volume weeks consistently, set him up really well. So he did that 6 months, general endurance, then did this 3 months and is kicked up again. And I think that's a blessing in disguise that he had the weight to lose, because it's forced him to do this really good recommended training that most sports scientists or good coaches would recommend a beginner does anyway. But usually a beginner's not going to do that because it's boring and they're not going to be bothered to just do 6 months of endurance training. So the fact he did that set him up really well for the first part of the year. Other thing as well, I just want to say, keep in mind, he's at 330-ish watts now FTP. There's still a ginormous gap to get from 330 to 384, which it would be to double his FTP, especially because of his fast twitch ability. He's already going to be utilizing that capacity throughout his test. So most of the gains now he's going to have to get is going to have to be more in his slow twitch muscle fibers, or a conversion from some of his fast twitch to slow twitch. And especially as he builds his training load and training intensity to keep chasing improvements to get closer to 380 watts, he may also start to drop a little bit of weight. And then as you drop weight, you may also hinder yourself in your fast twitch ability. And then it's going to be sort of competing with the fact that he's getting more fitter aerobically, fast twitch ability is dropping, and I think it's going to get a lot harder to keep seeing improvements once he's already at this 330 watt mark. Other thing as well to keep in mind for some of the people kind of calling bullshit in the comments on it, remember he is still 83 kilos. So if we look at the watts per kilo, he got to 4 watts per kilo. If you were 70 kilos, that's a 280 watt threshold. So it wouldn't look as good on paper if he was just a smaller, shorter rider and got from 220 to 280. I mean, it'd still be really good, but it wouldn't look as good. And I think it's kind of shocking people seeing that raw number and then maybe forgetting that he is still 83 kilos. Don't have much else to add here. He's absolutely killing it. Let's see. He's at 330 watts now. Let's follow him over the next few months, see where he can get to. I think he's really going to start to hit some roadblocks, especially related to his fiber type composition and how that will impact his ability to keep progressing aerobically. So he's going to have a lot of work to do. And yeah, let's see where he can get to over the year.